Moriden Athluan.
The story of his near single-handed assault on Windhelm and his execution of the traitor Ulrich Stormcloak of Windhelm are staples of the Imperial Legion. His devotion to duty, his zeal in combat, his dedication to the safety of the Empire and its citizens are told to all new recruits of the Legion.
Though his actions in the Civil War were what drew the eyes of all Tamriel to him, it is not what he is best known for. No, for it was after his days in the Legion that he began to show his true dedication to both the gods and the people of the Empire.
Come now and hear the tale of the Moriden Athluan's glorious mercenary days, and the great good that he did for all the people of Skyrim.
The bards can
worked
always
the
be
gods'
trusted
names.
to take a story and turn it to their own ends. There are elements of truth to their story. The truth, though, the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. I think I may have had a brief dream involving screaming, an outdoor cookfire, and a unicorn. I woke, and all of those elements were instantly explained. Except the unicorn. I have no idea where that came from. The room was on fire. The priest a still smoking pile of char in his bed. I'm going out on a limb here and guessing that the portrait was not the solution to the problem. Without the priest to give me obvious conclusions every few minutes, it is possible that I'll have this figured out in short order. Then again, the building is on fire, and that doesn't exactly instill confidence in what the next little bit of time holds for me. Before his demise, the priest had supposed that the odd goings-on were some kind of message, some odd way of trying to get a basic communication through to us. I don't think they are all that hard to interpret, personally. For example, the new arrangement in the reception hall was, I thought, a very clear message of, "I will kill you." I am new to this, however, so I could be wrong. Many of the main portions of the museum were now blocked by rubble or flame, or one of hundreds more skeletons, each of which had been killed in some kind of nasty weapon-related way, ranging from axes to the face, to one poor fellow who had 2 large hammers swung into a place that, if it hadn't killed him outright, would certainly make him wish they had. I found nothing but flames. I returned to the staff barracks, there being no place else to go, and found a note on the side table by the remains of the priest, and its contents revealed the fate of both Macnarian and his wife. The wife died in an unexplained fire, something I can relate to at the moment. Niles died in a drunken fall from the battlements, so the belief went, but no body was ever found. Since those battlements, or where they used to be anyhow, are the only thing that I might possibly be able to get to, that is where I will try to go. I didn't get that far, however, before I realized that I was being herded. This ghost, spectre, whatever you wanted to call it, was steering me to specific places, and any time I tried to turn away from that path, I would find it closed against me, which is how I found myself in the upper hallway when it went nearly pitch black. Flames began to appear, and then, in the distance, the figure of a woman. It seemed to jump from place to place without actually moving between those places, appearing and disappearing, and then, when she was directly before me, the woman seemed to study me for a moment before raising a hand and then vanishing. In her place, a book hung in the air, just hovered there, waiting for me to take it. The previous note had implied that Niles killed himself. This journal, however, makes that claim wrong. He had planned to push on, even to have his wife commemorated with a statue that he'd commissioned only the day before the news reached him. Somewhere, maybe up on that rock cliff he fell from, there is a receipt for that statue. It's the only lead I have now. The room went black, and when it cleared again, the priest was looking down at me with concern. Apparently everything that had just happened was some kind of twisted dream, except that I had both the note and the journal in hand, proof of what I had witnessed. The priest, true to form, gave the obvious advice. Go look at the battlements, the rocks where Macnarian slipped to his death. I just realized that this means that I dreamed of a dream of fire and screaming. I'm still not sure how the unicorn fit in, though. It should not be possible. Then again, none of what I've seen tonight should be, yet they are. I dropped into an alley between the Blue Palace and the museum, following it out onto the rocks of the Arch of Solitude. There, wedged in between some rocks and somehow preserved for decades, was a note. I do think, however, that the ghost making it glow bright purple might have been a bit much. And then again, with all that's happened tonight, it might have wanted to be absolutely certain that I didn't miss it. The note was a contract between an artist and Macnarian for the statue I had learned about in the dream, which means that, right now, somewhere nearby, there is a life-size statue of Lady Macnarian in marble that is half paid for. I know what the priest is going to say. Get the statue to the museum, problem solved. It's so obvious that even he won't miss it. Glad I have 4,000 septums just hanging out in my purse. Iron's going to owe me big for this. The priest was everything I had expected he would be. One who sat back, pontificated extensively, said a great many words that meant about nothing, and then watched as others did the work. Though the problem is not as yet solved, I can already hear him taking credit for the accomplishment. As best I can tell, all he did was take a couple of naps and tell me things I already knew. After that sparkling conversation, though, it was still pre-dawn, I walked out to the current residence of the grandson of the sculptor who had been commissioned by Macnarian. I had several questions for him. Did they still have the statue? Was it in good condition? Why, in all the realms of oblivion, did they hold on to it and let it gather dust somewhere instead of, oh, perhaps, just maybe, telling somebody about it and trying to get the rest of the money owed? I imagine I'll get answers to the first two, if never to the last. Arriving at Cutler's farm, the aforementioned residence, the man I needed to talk to was up already. The answers to my questions, in order, were yes, yes, and that never occurred to any of us, actually. I paid the man the remaining bill and asked that it get moved to the museum as quickly as possible, even if that meant flogging the workers to death. He thought I was joking. I thought it would be part of an equal trade. I met briefly with Arjen on the way back to the museum. I'd been wondering where he was, of course, and it turns out the answer was at the Blue Palace, waiting for the whole thing to be taken care of. I bit my cheek rather than tear into him, and that turned out to be rather fortunate. He'd already heard that I was assisting with the situation and decided that he was going to, I think the phrase among gamblers is, sweeten the pot for me. There was a rather large suite of rooms built onto the top of the reception hall, ones that hadn't really been used in some time. He had been preparing them for me anyway, as a surprise for later, but figured this might be a better time to give me the key. He handed it to me, patted me on the shoulder, and then encouraged me to go have a look. Since the ghost wouldn't be taking any actions during daylight hours, it would be safe enough. In my quick walk through the museum, it turns out he was right, apart from the mannequins still baking bread in the staff barracks, anyhow. The rooms, they were lavish. This set of rooms was larger than the entirety of Bree's home in Whiterun, and for this I paid exactly nothing. Well, I'd put in a good amount of time for him already with the promise of a large amount more, but still, this was everything I could possibly want in a home. So, while I waited for that statue to finally be delivered, I spent time getting to know my new home and all the amenities it had to offer. Mid-afternoon, I descended from the safe house to check on the arrival of the statue. I took the return of the reception hall furniture to the floor as a good sign, as well as the mannequin's return to typical non-mobile mannequin behavior. The priest was outside, of course, waiting to claim credit. He did nothing. Zero. So if this is what Arkay wanted him to do, I can most definitely scratch that divine off my list as well. In fact, if it weren't for Mara, I'd have to conclude that all of it is made up. And even Mara is on my do not get further involved with list. With all that said, I do confess to some level of confusion with regards to the statue. I'm sure that Macnarian loved his wife dearly. The statue and everything we've been through only confirms that. I am, however, a bit unsure how the lady would have reacted to the statue. I'm sure it's a fair likeness, but, well, on the upside, let's just say that we're likely to have a larger number of teenage boys visiting the museum on a more frequent basis, and leave it at that. After 2 days of sorting through donations, submissions, and general common items, the job was done. The items that were worth mentioning were up in various places around the museum, and though there are a fair number of them, the place still feels very empty. I wonder if Arjen should have started small and expanded out as we found more to offer. That is his side of the venture, though, not mine. I am content to finally get a good night's sleep. And a good night it will be. This bedroom is fit for royalty, and anyone who tries to get me out of this will not have a good day. Finally, I feel like I am in control of my life again. I still have the business with Mara's priestess to finish, of course, but I know that won't go anywhere. And then there's also the retrieval of the horn of Jurgen Windcaller, so I can learn more about the voice and how it can be used. But that won't be the end-all of my life either. The museum, however, a living monument to me, to my accomplishments. That is something I can get behind. Of course, that won't build itself up. So tomorrow, I leave for the tomb of Ustengrav, near Morthal in Hjalmarch. Once that's done, I'll deliver the thing, learn what I can from the Greybeards, and then drop back down to Riften and finish that business off as well. After that, wherever the winds or my own whimsy might take me, this is what I want, to control my own destiny, to make the choices that steer my life. It's not quite the purpose I had almost 2 months ago, I'll grant, but it is something I can live with. For now. 18 Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. Madran's caravan was on its way into Solitude when I encountered them on the road, and the tale that Madran spun for me is... well, this entire sordid tale is almost farcical. The caravan had been using Belethor's sister as a housekeeper of sorts. Fine, so far as it goes. That is, until a bandit clan working out of Broken Ore Grotto on the Hafingar coast captured the lot of them. Madran sold her to ensure the rest of the caravan's release. Which means that she is currently a housekeeper for a bunch of bandits at Broken Ore Grotto. Which means I am now changing my plans and heading there first. No woman should be a slave in a bandit clan. I don't even want to consider what may be happening there with her. It took some hours to find the grotto, but once spotted, it was hard not to realize what kind of place it had to be. Broken ships, a trio of scarred and unruly-looking men, the stereotypical look to a bandit hideout. Pirate, I guess I should say. I considered asking the trio which word they preferred, but they were all dead at that point and had little to contribute. I sneaked through the entrance, catching the dual guards by surprise, and with little chance to warn any others deeper in. I didn't want this band to realize I'm here until I've located Belethor's sister, assuming she's even here. Given how often she's been sold at this point, I'd almost be shocked if this was the end of her road. I cleared out the bandits, most of them before they knew I was there, though the last few tried to take me at once. The narrow catwalks worked against them here, allowing me to deal with each as an individual. Once I put an arrow through the self-styled Pirate King's belly, I started to search for something about their housekeeper. I found it in the leader's journal. I read it. I almost died of laughter. They'd gotten a housekeeper, but she'd turned into a tyrant, not allowing even the littlest speck of dust to exist in the grotto. After 3 weeks of that, they all voted to sell her again, this time to a band of warlocks out of Boulderfall Cave. Naturally. Even more naturally, this is on the other side of Skyrim, up in the rift somewhere. I'll continue following this bread trail, though Belethor's gratitude had better be worth my time. The day now wasted mostly on this continuing goose chase, I ended up back in Solitude in the safe house. Apart from Aryan having hired a new captain of the museum guard, a laudable notion, nothing had changed. Even the ghosts were still there, as it turned out, and I saw them both peacefully walking the halls, taking in the sights. My plan from this morning is now my plan for tomorrow, which means onward to Morthal. 19 Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. As I will need to stop in Morthal to get better directions to Ustengrav, I decided that a little bit of civil duty needed to be exercised. I'm not sure why, but Fort Snowhawk, just off the main road between Solitude and Morthal, was never taken possession of by the Imperials during the war. Actually, I can guess why now. Karstav was a known hive of necromancers before the Stormcloaks cleared it, and so is Snowhawk. I think the difference is in sheer numbers and the layout of the fort. There are so many places to hide, and there were so many of these deviant mages that I could easily see a clearing force getting routed, if not straight up destroyed. If it hadn't been for the voice, I might have joined them, honestly. With luck, the Imperials will take the fort now that I've emptied it. Travelers of the province will all greatly appreciate them doing that. A talk with the keeper of the Moorside Inn gave me what I needed, along with a few rumors and the like going around town. The first I wanted, the second was interesting, but unimportant, at least to me. Cities this small, even when they are a capital, are hotbeds for gossip, superstition, and other nonsense. The most recent scandal in town has something to do with a man's house burning down, his wife and child dying, and then almost immediately shacking up with some other woman in town. Yes, completely improper, not something I'd talk openly about with a stranger in town, though. Rumor even says that there might be a ghost involved, but after the last one I dealt with, not something I care to repeat just yet. Not without there being a significant payoff for it, anyhow. 20 Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. Ustengrav is to the northeast of Morthal, across a few major runoffs in the swamp. Not hard to get to, according to the locals, though they don't care to go into that area of the swamp much. I made the mistake of asking why, and got everything from vampires to werewolves to malicious pixies. I left early enough to not run into any more of the town's citizens. I'd had enough storytelling for one day, and I wanted to get to Ustengrav and start my explorations as quickly as possible. If it's anything like Bleak Falls or Corvinyand, then I'll need all the time I can get to work my way through the tomb. If it is as important as the Greybeards seem to think it is, then perhaps even longer. This tomb is of apparent interest to a number of people, including a group of necromancers and mages who attacked me when I somehow stumbled straight into one of their undead minions. A short fight ensued, in which I threw several of them into the surrounding stonework at high speed, though the undead were still problematic. It's hard to swap out weapons as you shout and run for better positioning. In the end, however, they all lay dead. Or dead again, as the case may be. I entered the tomb, swapping my weapons for my silver ones. There were more mages in the first rooms of the tomb, but none even further in. Those who got that far were all already dead. The Draugr made certain of that. Even if an individual creature couldn't do it, the sheer numbers were enough to overwhelm them, especially when they were announcing their presence with their magic. I let them all play. It saved me time and arrows, and then I started the real work. I moved slowly, picking off and setting fire to each undead beast as I went. Some of them required a little more convincing to go back to eternal sleep, but the silver material of the bow, combined with the enchantment and silver arrows as well, was very good at convincing them that sleeping was a good idea. A little further on, and I started to question where this tomb was. Skyrim? Or some plane of oblivion that none had yet discovered? The space I entered was truly massive. Full-size trees dotted the ground below me, and in the distance I could make out what looked like another of the stone walls carved with dragon words, which gave me a more immediate destination in the cave, though I doubt that the horn I'm looking for is there. Of more concern is the number of Draugr actively roaming the open spaces. And with all of it open, it will be far harder to set up decent shots. It also means I'm going to need far more time than I had originally thought. What I had thought were Draugr were, in fact, just skeletons, far easier to deal with and far less of a nuisance overall. My descent to the bottom was all but unopposed. The wall, when I got to it, seemed far smoother and simpler than the previous times. The word glowed as last time, and the word flowed into me, fade, and it combined with one of the concepts I had already absorbed from a dead dragon. And naturally I had to see what it did. As someone who has learned to appreciate stealth, the ability to further fade into the background would be invaluable. That is what this shout does, though how effective it is when you have to scream, I'm not entirely certain. Maybe with this one a whisper will work. The wall now dealt with, I walked back to the main level to see where the sky bridge I'd seen earlier led. The bridge led to a pair of skeletons, easily dealt with, and a small puzzle, only a small one though. There was a distinct reason, it seems, that the Greybeards taught me Whirlwind Sprint. They knew that only someone who knew that shout would be able to pass through this small test, not puzzle, but test. Each of the columns reacted to me as I passed, opening one of 3 gates in the following hallway. Only by sprinting past them using the voice could I cover the required distance. Which means everything I see from here on was intended only for those who know how to use the voice. This could be good or bad, but either way I will be very careful and observant, as if I hadn't been before. What followed were 2 short passages full of spiders and vermin, most of which removed themselves from existence using the many fire traps that were embedded in the floor. I'm sure that when this was designed, the idea was that only a master of the voice using Whirlwind Sprint would be able to cross these without getting torched. However, I've already learned how to not trigger traps when I walk through them. The last room, however, that was a little more special. As I passed through it, walking towards what was obviously Jurgen Windcollar's sarcophagus, pillars rose from the 2 pools on either side of the path as though in greeting. Before the tomb was Windcollar's sword, and atop it, in a cradle made to receive it, was his horn, the object of my search. When I emerged from the tomb, far sooner than I had expected due to a built-in shortcut back to the beginning areas of the site, I found that a snowstorm had blown in. Not unusual, even for early autumn in Skyrim. I'd been contemplating beginning the walk to Iverstead and High Hrothgar to deliver the horn, but the storm changed those plans. Instead, I revived one of the fires the previous occupants of the campsite had used and slept the night here. I'm not certain what will be next after I deliver the horn. They will know I am Dragonborn, and that is a step forward, but it is just a title. There are no expectations, I think, to go with it. I will be interested to see what they try to convince me to do, but I already know this. Anything they ask of me that does not give me power, I will ignore. I have said it before, but it now bears repeating. I have learned these last months that there is nothing in Tamriel that does not seek to serve itself. Ulfric, much as I hate him, was my first lesson in this, though I did not see it at the time. The Legion was my second, and now the gods are the third. Even those who are considered divine do not help unless it helps themselves as well. Mara is a good example, really. I am done with being another's pawn. I will break free of others and make my own destiny. That doesn't mean I ignore everyone else, of course. It simply means I will not do their bidding unless I see a way to advance my own desires.